So here we are on the north side of Pontianak, but that thing just behind me, which you can see, that there is the official spot for the equator. So basically what it is and there's another one over there. So now I'm literally standing on the equator somewhere around here. But we're going to go inside, have a look at that there, and we're going to talk about a couple of interesting facts about actually being on the equator, and specifically being on the equator here in Pontianak, because believe it or not, that actually does make a difference. Anyway, we'll see you in a sec. So what have we got here? So here we are on the south of the equator, and literally I've got this line just through here, and now we're on the north. But what's interesting about this is we're in Pontianak, and the reason why that is so interesting is because we're at GMT +7, which is Greenwich Mean Time +7. And so the north and south, this is a magnetic phenomenon that separates between the north point of the northern Arctic and the Antarctic. Now, so that there is arbitrary, but the time zones aren't. The time zones were set, I forget when, but what it means is that this was a time zone's a man-made creation, and there's good reasons for it, but they had to set up an arbitrary point where this is, okay, this is going to be the central point, which is Greenwich, which is in England. And so what they've done is to say when it is the sun's directly overhead as midday, they've gone, you have to actually go plus or minus from there. So what that means is, so parts of America are, I think, are -7, -8, probably -10, somewhere around there. Where we are in Pontianak, it is +7. On the east coast of Australia, it's +10. I think New Zealand is +11. Don't quote me on that. Anyway, so as you can imagine, now you get to a point which is called +12. Well, that's the exact same point as -12. So, what does that mean? So, I mean, in reality, it means nothing other than the dates that you write down for certain things. So, being +12, we are on the 22nd of September. The 23rd of September, sorry. I just had to look up and check it. As the... that's not correct. It should be the 22nd of September at this point. Anyway, I'll explain that in a second. But you do have 23rd of September in places like America. And right now I'm getting confused. Okay, so I was a little bit wrong earlier on. So this here, that's not on the equator. That there is, but this here is actually roughly going south. So we're definitely in the southern hemisphere now, and the equator is up there. Okay, another interesting fact about the equator, and being, as we know, that the Earth is on an axis, which is what gives us our seasons and makes the days longer and shorter. Mind you, you really only start noticing that outside of the Tropic of Capricorn and the Tropic of Cancer. And the reason that is because as you get closer to the poles, it's actually more extreme. Here on the equator itself, it is, you just don't notice it. Days don't really get longer and shorter, and it's a weird sort of like collaborative sort of effect, which I've really got to sit down and research, because it's, well, for me personally, I find that quite interesting. But it is so minor, you just don't notice the differences in the time from one day to the next, as opposed to what you do at the most extremes. Anyway, so here we are in a really interesting spot here where I'm talking about being on the equator and the equinoxes. Now, what's interesting is a true equinox doesn't go for a day. I know, I'm sorry, well, even the equinoxes, but a true solstice, true equinox doesn't go for one day. I know we always talk about equinoxes as going for one day. It's the 23rd of September, 22nd of March, and all that sort of stuff. And then you've got the summer and winter, the mid-year and end-of-year solstice. But what's interesting is you've got to remember the Earth is constantly moving. It's on a roughly fixed incline, and as it's moving around the sun, it is literally only a moment in time. And I'm not talking about a short period of time, even like a second or even a fraction of a second. I'm literally talking about a point in time. So what happens is 1 second before, the Earth is inclined in one direction. 1 second afterwards, the Earth is inclined in the other direction, as in reference to the sun being perpendicular to the sun itself. So what that means is that we only use an approximation because, well, day, night, and at 12 o'clock when the sun's directly overhead, it actually is it's overhead, and so we just use that for normal everyday stuff. But what is interesting is if on the equinoxes, if we stand and there is no shadow, and so unlike say someone like me where you've got odd shapes, use a pole, make sure it's 100% perpendicular, and I'll get to a point where there's no shadow. I put something down the road, another pole there, and slightly later or earlier, depending on where I put it, it will hit no shadow. So that means it is truly perpendicular to the sun. Time zones kind of obscure that, and for everyday purposes, who cares? Anyway, so what is interesting is though that you've only really got one, possibly 2 points on the planet where you get that true point where I'm not even talking about what you can and can't see, but truly directly overhead is the sun, 100%. And so that's a quite interesting phenomenon, and that personally is where I believe the international dateline should be. Not the international time zone should start from. So we're, like I said before, here in Pontianak we're +7. On the east coast of Australia you're +10. And you go in the other direction, you get your minuses. England is 0 because when we started doing this sort of stuff, England was the centre of world power, and so they called the shots at that time. And so that's why you have these plus and minuses and all that. But it does make a really interesting quirks when you get to these really nice little spots where you're right on the equator, and you get similar sort of stuff so at the north and south poles, where because of this at different times of years it changes different things. It's actually quite interesting. Another couple of interesting points is the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. What are those? Well, they are the points from the equator that balance out the rotation, the tilt of the planet. So what does that mean? Well, that means at the summer equinox, and I'm literally talking about the summer equinox, not the winter one, but at the summer equinox, the sun is actually directly overhead and you get no shadow. Anything in between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, the sun actually moves from north to south depending on what time of the year it is and where you are in relation to all of that. And the extremities are the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. Anyway, Really, really interesting sort of stuff. And the only thing I'm left to say is, well, cheers.